So guys, I wanted to understand your vision, what you expect to see with pipelines and pipelining frameworks in the context of large language models that are not necessarily trained. If we skip fine-tuning, then it is hard to say that they are being trained.
What use cases would you say? Like, would you say some companies would now start to build their own ChatGPT internally, or?
No, I think such it would be quite niche because there are not so many companies that can afford to it. Of course, open source large language models and compressing them, making them more specific to particular need, it is a case. And then yes, we can talk about training. But let's say that it is not the case. We are talking about a company that used to solve a particular problem around natural language processing using traditional deep learning, and they think that maybe generic model and using it just through API would do the job better. Have you heard about such cases among your users, customers? Have you heard some needs around large language models from the teams that are using ZenML?
I mean, everybody wants large language models. But I think, to be honest, maybe this is another discussion, but I don't really agree that you say this is a niche use case that people will be training LLMs. I sort of think the world will not be an API-driven world in the future, but rather many people will actually be training these things. But anyway, that wasn't the premise of your question. So you said, okay, no training, everything behind an API. Okay, cool. So if that's the case, then I think that still there's different challenges to running LLMs in production. I mean, this is what we were talking about, that we don't need to take an opinion on the stack component. So for example, with the vector stores, it's another stack component, sort of, right? If you can think about it. So the stack keeps evolving and changing and problems keep happening. And I think that the way we look at it is that you still need something that connects the different puzzle pieces together. And I think we can still add a lot of value even in that world, just for the fact that you need to still version. You need to have different problem of hallucinations that you need to keep track of. You need to probably update things. You need to maybe have some layer in front of these APIs that do something else in inference. So, I mean, there's tons of problems. We don't even know them yet. So I think it's let the world settle down. For after in a year or two, we'll probably have a chat again.
How are you jumping on the hype train? I would be super interested.
So usually now people really want, if not talking about super complicated chains of large language models, is just being able to see, first of all, how much did their call to a specific LLM API cost, right? How much did it take to actually, what is the response latency? What was the kind of prompt template passed? What was were the inputs and what was the output? And being able to kind of visually inspect this and also combine different groups of inputs and calculate some accuracy metrics, because there are some ways of how you can calculate the accuracies, or just not the accuracies, but the metrics around how good the outputs are.
Is more complex than, or
yeah, more complex but available. Like even this most popular now way to do it, using other large language models to evaluate the output of other large language models, right? So calculating a score for each of the
LR rating, I think, based.
And it's super useful for people to be able to see that and analyze the results via a central place, right? So we are working on integrations of this sort naturally with LangChain, right? But we don't think that LangChain is the only framework that we should support. So it should be a little bit more general. So you can actually log it directly from OpenAI or use LangChain, right? Or any other providers. And of course, as time goes, we will evolve to more complicated use cases like chain tracing, right? So to understand where the problems in the more complicated large language chains are happening, so that you can debug directly from the UI.
And I think that from jobs to be done perspective, the functionality Aurimas listed is actually very close to what I would define on a higher level as jobs to be done for experiment tracker. That would be debugging my experiments, debugging my prompts or set of prompts, understanding, or sometimes it was called meta ML. So I've tested, I've trained a few models or a lot of models, or I've tested a lot of prompts, and I want to understand on the meta level patterns, what caused what, where I should look for ideas for improvement, and some level of reproducibility, or at least being able to understand how it was done. So it is, from jobs to be done perspective, it is very close to what we have been already doing, but we are missing some components to support those specific use cases in a nicer way. It is, yes, you still can do it, but the UX wouldn't be great, and we need to improve it.